To understand the Melungeon mystery, we need to go back to 1784 in the mountains of eastern Tennessee. A land surveyor named John Sevier was mapping the frontier when he encountered something that made him stop dead in his tracks. Living in log cabins along the ridges were families who looked like no one he'd ever seen. They had copper-coloured skin, straight black hair, and European features. They spoke English with an accent he couldn't place and used words that sounded ancient. They claimed to be Portuguese, Sevier wrote in his journal, but they look like no Portuguese I've ever met. The families called themselves Melungeons, a word whose origin would puzzle linguists for centuries. These mountain people had been living in Appalachia since before the American Revolution, but no one knew where they came from. They weren't white, they weren't black, they weren't Indian. In a world that divided people into three races, the Melungeons didn't fit anywhere. And in early America, not fitting in was dangerous. The first real tragedy struck in 1834 when Tennessee passed its new constitution. The law said only free white persons could vote, own land, or testify in court. Suddenly, Melungeon families who had owned their mountain farms for generations found themselves legally classified as free persons of colour. They lost their voting rights overnight. Their children were banned from public schools. Some families lost land that had been in their possession for 50 years because they couldn't legally defend their ownership in court. The Vardy Collins case shows just how cruel this system was. Vardy was a Melungeon war hero who fought in the War of 1812. In 1846, a white neighbour claimed Vardy's 300-acre farm belonged to him. When Vardy went to court, the judge ruled that, as a person of colour, Vardy couldn't testify in his own defence. He lost everything. His family was forced to move higher into the mountains, onto land so poor that no white person wanted it. This pattern repeated across Appalachia as Melungeon families were pushed onto ridgetops where the soil was thin and farming was nearly impossible. They survived by hunting, gathering medicinal herbs, and making moonshine, one of the few ways they could earn cash in an economy that excluded them. The isolation had a strange effect. It preserved their culture and bloodlines, but also created genetic bottlenecks that would have serious consequences. Dr. Virginia DeMarce, who spent 40 years researching Melungeon genealogy, found that most of today's 200,000 Melungeons descend from just 15 original families. These families, the Collins, Gibson, Goins, Minor, Mullins, and others, intermarried for centuries in their mountain communities. Church records from Newman's Ridge in Tennessee show the same surnames appearing generation after generation. A Gibson would marry a Collins, their daughter would marry a Mullins, and their son would marry another Gibson. This wasn't by choice, it was survival. Marrying outside the community meant risking violence or legal persecution. But who were these original families? Where did they come from? For 200 years, the Melungeons themselves told different stories. Some claimed to be descendants of Portuguese sailors shipwrecked on the Carolina coast. Others said they were Turkish slaves who escaped from Spanish ships. Still others claimed descent from the lost colony of Roanoke. White neighbours had their own theories, most of them insulting. They called Melungeons triracial isolates, suggesting they were a mix of runaway slaves, Indians, and white outlaws. Academic researchers in the early 1900s measured Melungeon skulls and declared them a degraded race, unfit for civilization. But the Melungeons kept insisting they were different. They pointed to physical features that didn't match any simple racial mixture. Many had what scientists call the Anatolian bump, a distinctive knob on the back of the skull common in Mediterranean populations. They had Asian-looking eyes but European noses. Some had 6 fingers or toes, a genetic trait called polydactyly that runs in certain populations. They suffered from diseases unknown in other Appalachian communities: Mediterranean fever, Behçet's disease, and thalassemia. The mystery deepened when linguists studied old Melungeon words preserved in family stories. Then came the DNA revolution. In 2002, Dr. Kevin Jones at the University of Virginia started the Melungeon DNA project. He collected samples from 120 people whose families had been identified as Melungeon for generations. What he found shocked everyone. The Y-chromosome results, passed from father to son, showed an incredible diversity. About 30% carried haplogroup R1b, common in Western Europe. Another 25% had haplogroup E, which originated in Africa. 15% carried haplogroup J, found mainly in the Middle East. 10% had haplogroup Q, marking Native American ancestry. The remaining 20% was a mix of other lineages from Central Asia, India, and the Mediterranean. This wasn't just a triracial mix. The mitochondrial DNA, passed from mother to daughter, was equally diverse. European haplogroups like H and U were common, but so were African haplogroups L1 and L2. Native American haplogroups A, B, C, and D appeared in about 15% of samples. But the real surprises were haplogroups M and N, typically found in South Asia and the Middle East. Dr. Jones compared these results to other American populations. No other group showed this level of diversity. Even highly mixed populations like Louisiana Creoles or Brazilian Pardos had more predictable patterns. The Melungeons were unique, but how did people from Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas all end up in the Appalachian Mountains? The answer came from historical detective work combined with genetic genealogy. Researcher Paul Heinegg spent decades combing through colonial records in Virginia and North Carolina. He found something remarkable. In the 1600s and early 1700s, before strict racial laws, the American colonies were more fluid than we imagine. Portuguese and Spanish sailors jumped ship in Virginia ports. Turkish and Arab galley slaves escaped from Mediterranean vessels. Free African craftsmen worked alongside European indentured servants. Native Americans traded and intermarried with all these groups. One documented case involves John Collins, recorded in 1640s Virginia. He's listed as a Turk who married a Native American woman. Their children married into families of Portuguese sailors and free African landowners. By 1750, their descendants were established farmers in the frontier regions that would become Tennessee and Kentucky. Another family line traces to Portuguese Ishmael, who appeared in North Carolina in 1690. He married the daughter of a Native American chief and an escaped African woman. Their grandchildren married into families descended from Mediterranean sailors and English settlers. These weren't isolated cases. Dr. Tim Hashaw's research identified at least 50 mixed families in colonial Virginia and North Carolina, who later became identified as Melungeon. They shared certain characteristics. They were free people of colour who owned land. They practiced trades like blacksmithing and carpentry, and they moved to the frontier when racial laws tightened in the Tidewater regions. The genetic evidence supports this colonial mixing theory. Dr. Roberta Estes, analysing Melungeon DNA in detail, found something fascinating. The genetic signatures weren't recent. They dated back 300 to 400 years, exactly matching the colonial period. Even more interesting, the Middle Eastern and North African DNA showed specific patterns. It wasn't generalized Mediterranean. It was specifically from regions that provided galley slaves to Spanish and Portuguese ships. Coastal Algeria, Tunisia, Western Turkey, exactly where Christian Europeans would have raided for Muslim slaves who ended up in the Americas. But here's where it gets really interesting. Some Melungeon families carry genetic markers that are vanishingly rare in modern populations. Dr. Janet Kahn found that several Melungeon lines carry a mitochondrial mutation that exists in only 0.01% of the world population. This mutation is found in exactly 3 places: isolated villages in northern Portugal, the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, and Melungeon communities in Appalachia. This suggests that some Melungeon ancestors came from very specific places and maintained their genetic distinctiveness through centuries of isolation. It's like finding a genetic time capsule. The discrimination Melungeons faced shaped their survival strategies in profound ways. They developed what sociologists call ethnic shifting, the ability to change their racial identity depending on circumstances. A Melungeon man might be Portuguese when applying for a marriage license, Indian when avoiding the draft, and white when trying to vote. Census records show the same families classified differently from decade to decade. The 1830 census might list them as free-coloured. By 1840, they're mulatto. In 1850, they become Indian. By 1860, if they move to a new county, they might successfully pass as white. This wasn't deception, it was survival. The consequences of being classified as non-white were severe. In Tennessee, free people of colour paid triple the taxes of whites. In Virginia, they needed special permits to own guns or dogs. In North Carolina, they couldn't testify against whites, making them easy targets for theft and violence. Education was the cruelest exclusion. Melungeon children were barred from white schools, but also unwelcome in black schools. Some communities created their own schools, but without tax support, they could rarely afford teachers or books. The illiteracy rate in Melungeon communities reached 90% by 1900. Mahala Mullins became a legend for her creative resistance. A Melungeon woman who weighed nearly 500 pounds, when sheriffs came to arrest her, they couldn't figure out how to get her down the mountain. She'd sit in her doorway blocking the entrance and dare them to move her. She was never successfully prosecuted. But most Melungeons weren't so lucky. Court records from the 1800s are full of tragic cases. The Civil War brought hope and horror in equal measure. Melungeons found themselves caught between sides. The Confederacy tried to conscript them for labor battalions, essentially slave work. The Union Army was suspicious of their mixed appearance. Many Melungeon men hid in mountain caves for the entire war, emerging only at night to tend hidden gardens. Some fought for the Union, hoping victory would bring equality. Jordan Gibson from Hancock County enlisted in the 8th Tennessee Infantry. He survived 14 battles only to return home and find he still couldn't vote. His pension application was repeatedly denied because officials couldn't determine his race. After the war, Reconstruction briefly offered hope. The 14th and 15th Amendments should have guaranteed Melungeon rights. But as soon as federal troops left, southern states found new ways to exclude them. Poll taxes, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses kept Melungeons from voting well into the 1960s. The early 1900s brought the Eugenics movement, and Melungeons became targets of racial scientists. Arthur Estabrook from the Carnegie Institution studied Melungeon families like laboratory specimens. His 1926 report called them a dangerous element, prone to feeble-mindedness and criminality. This wasn't just academic prejudice, it had real consequences. Virginia's Racial Integrity Act of 1924 defined anyone with even one drop of non-white blood as coloured. Suddenly, Melungeons who had been passing as white for generations were exposed. Birth certificates were changed. Marriages were invalidated. Children were expelled from white schools. Plecker, Virginia's Registrar of Vital Statistics, became obsessed with hunting down Melungeons. He kept lists of suspect surnames and sent spies to mountain communities. He'd examine school children for signs of mixed ancestry, checking fingernails, examining hair texture, looking for the Melungeon bump. One heartbreaking case involved the Ramsey family of Wise County. They had successfully integrated into white society, with children in college and businesses in town. But in 1943, someone sent Plecker an anonymous letter claiming the Ramseys were Melungeon. Plecker changed their racial classification overnight. The children were expelled from college. The father lost his business contracts. The daughter's white fiancé broke off their engagement. The family fled to Ohio, where they changed their names and never spoke of their origins again. This pattern repeated hundreds of times. Melungeon families scattered across the country, settling in cities where no one knew their history. They became white if they could pass, black if they couldn't, Mexican in the southwest, Italian in the northeast, anything but Melungeon. Parents refused to tell children about their heritage. Family photos were burned. Genealogical records were destroyed. A culture that had survived 200 years of mountain isolation was nearly erased in a single generation. But genes don't lie. In the 1990s, a new generation started asking questions. Why did grandmother have such unusual features? Why were we never allowed to visit certain relatives? Why did Great-Aunt Martha always insist we were Portuguese, when we looked nothing like the Portuguese kids at school? The internet changed everything. Melungeon descendants who thought they were alone found others with the same stories. Websites like Melungeon Heritage Association connected thousands of people searching for their roots. Family photos were shared, stories compared, genealogies reconstructed. Then came consumer DNA testing. For $99, anyone could discover their genetic ancestry. Thousands of Americans who thought they were simply white or black suddenly discovered unexpected ethnicities. Dr. Roberta Estes' analysis of modern Melungeon DNA reveals the lasting impact of centuries of isolation and intermarriage. Certain genetic combinations appear only in Melungeon populations. They carry specific mutations that act like genetic fingerprints, marking descent from those original colonial families. One such marker is a variation in the EDAR gene that affects hair thickness and sweat glands. It's found in only 3 populations worldwide: East Asians, Native Americans, and Melungeons. But Melungeons have a unique version that suggests their Asian ancestry came through a different route than typical Native Americans. Another is a mutation in the LCT gene, affecting lactose tolerance. Most adults worldwide are lactose intolerant, but Europeans evolved tolerance through cattle herding. Melungeons show a pattern where some family members have the European version, others the African version, and still others the Asian version, sometimes all in the same family. Doctors in Appalachian hospitals now routinely ask about Melungeon heritage when diagnosing certain conditions. The cultural rediscovery has been equally dramatic. Melungeon descendants are reclaiming traditions their grandparents tried to forget. Foodways preserved in mountain hollers are being recognized as unique fusion cuisines. Music scholars have identified Melungeon influences in Appalachian folk music. Language preservation efforts have documented hundreds of unique Melungeon words and phrases. Segoglin means crooked or leaning. Jasper means stranger or outsider. These aren't just quaint dialect, they're linguistic fossils from the colonial mixing pot. Modern Melungeon identity is complicated. Some embrace it fully, attending heritage festivals and joining genealogy groups. Others, especially older generations, still refuse to acknowledge it. The fear runs deep. Grandparents remember when being identified as Melungeon meant losing everything. Young Melungeons face different challenges. College applications ask for race, but what box do you check when you're genetically everything? Some identify as multiracial, others choose based on appearance or family tradition. A few write Melungeon in the other category, reclaiming an identity their ancestors were forced to hide. The legal implications continue today. In 2020, a Virginia court case hinged on whether Melungeons qualified for minority business contracts. The judge ruled they didn't fit any existing category, too mixed to be a single minority, too historically oppressed to be considered white. It's the same legal limbo their ancestors faced, just in modern form. If you found this story of genetic mystery and cultural survival fascinating, please like this video and share it with others who might have their own hidden heritage to discover. Do you have mysterious family stories or unexpected DNA results? Share your experiences in the comments below. Remember, we all carry history in our genes. The only question is whether we're brave enough to learn what it really says about who we are and where we come from. I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.